We live in a world that sells a comforting lie. It's whispered in boardrooms, preached from podiums, and coded into the algorithms that shape our lives. The lie that power comes from being liked, that influence is a product of affection, and that to be loved is to be strong. But what if that's not just wrong, but dangerously naive? What if the most stable form of power isn't built on the shifting sands of love, but on something much colder and much more reliable? Fear. This is not a pleasant thought. It's not something you'll see on a motivational poster. But it is a central, brutal idea from one of history's most notorious and misunderstood thinkers, Niccolò Machiavelli. For over 500 years, his name has been shorthand for tyranny and ruthless ambition. His masterpiece, The Prince, has been called a handbook for dictators, a book so poisonous it should be kept under lock and key. But who was Machiavelli? He wasn't a king or a tyrant. He was a diplomat, a public servant man who had a front row seat to the brutal theater of politics. Watching states rise and crumble, he saw well-intentioned leaders, adored by their people, get torn apart because they didn't understand the savage mechanics of power. There's much debate about why he wrote The Prince. Was it a cynical job application to the ruling Medici family, a satire, or a genuine guide? Whatever the motive, he presented it as a survival manual for a world that doesn't play by the rules. He argued that how we ought to live and how we actually live are two very different things, and a leader who ignores this reality invites ruin, not just for himself, but for everyone he's responsible for. In a world that obsesses over being loved and admired, what if the most reliable path to power lies in its opposite? Over years ago, Niccolò Machiavelli argued that while love is fickle, fear is a tool a ruler can project and control. This isn't about mindless cruelty. It's about surgical precision. It's not about being a monster. It's about understanding that to protect the sheep, the shepherd must sometimes act like a wolf. Today, we're diving into the dark heart of political strategy to break down 8 of Machiavelli's most enduring and controversial lessons from The Prince. This isn't a list he created, but our way of organizing his timeless ideas. We'll explore how fear, when understood and applied correctly, can be sculpted into a powerful tool for control. We'll use his own ideas, look at modern arenas where his lessons play out daily, and dissect the psychology that makes these strategies so devastatingly effective. This is the playbook they don't want you to read. It is safer to be feared than loved. Let's start with Machiavelli's most infamous piece of advice, the cornerstone of his philosophy on power. If you have to choose, it's much safer to be feared than to be loved. At first glance, this sounds like a tyrant's creed. It flies in the face of everything we're taught about modern leadership inspiration, trust, collaboration. But Machiavelli wasn't interested in what sounded nice. He was interested in what worked. He looked at human nature with a cold, unblinking eye, and saw people as generally ungrateful, fickle, false, cowardly, covetous. His logic is brutally simple. Love, he argues, is a bond of obligation held together by gratitude, an emotion that depends entirely on the goodwill of others. And because people are self-interested, that bond will be broken the moment it becomes inconvenient. The ally who loves you today will become a rival tomorrow if a better opportunity comes along. Love is a feeling you receive, leaving you at the mercy of others to keep giving it. Fear, on the other hand, is a feeling you project. It's based on a dread of punishment, which never fails. It doesn't rely on anyone's affection. It relies on a primal and predictable calculation. Self-preservation. While someone might betray you for a greater reward, they'll think twice if the punishment is certain and severe. Fear is a wall you build, a deterrent you control. A wise ruler, Machiavelli concludes, must build his power on what is his own, not on what belongs to others. The psychological mechanism at play here is related to what we now call loss aversion. Behavioral psychology shows the pain of losing something often feels more powerful than the pleasure of gaining something of equal value. Love offers a potential gain continued support and warmth. Fear, however, presents a definite and painful loss of status, freedom, or even life. A leader building power on love is asking for loyalty. A leader building power on fear is demanding it by making the alternative unthinkable. Think of the modern corporate world. A friendly, well-liked manager might see performance slip because there are no real consequences for failure. On the other hand, A demanding executive known for high standards and for swiftly removing underperformers often commands a level of focus the loved manager can't. The fear of being cut from the team can be a more consistent motivator than the desire to please a nice boss. From a purely Machiavellian view, their control is undeniably stronger. Inflict all injuries at once, but dispense benefits gradually. This second lesson is all about mastering psychological timing. It's not enough to be feared. You have to be smart about it. Machiavelli advises that when a new leader takes power, they must identify all the harsh measures needed to secure their position. Then, they must execute them all in one swift, decisive stroke. His reasoning is a masterclass in managing public perception. A series of cruel acts, dragged out over time, keeps people in a constant state of anxiety and resentment. Every day brings the possibility of a new punishment, a new purge. This breeds a slow-burning hatred that will eventually explode into rebellion. The ruler is seen as capriciously cruel and can never feel safe. But if all the necessary injuries are done at once, the shock is immense, but short. The violence happens, and then it's over. As time passes, the memory of that initial shock fades. Now, the ruler can begin phase 2, handing out benefits, rewards, and favors slowly, a little at a time. This creates a powerful psychological contrast. After the harsh beginning, even small acts of kindness seem much more significant. A small tax cut, a public festival, a new project. These gestures, doled out over years, create a new story. People start to see a ruler who, after a tough start, has become benevolent. They begin to forget the initial terror and feel a sense of gratitude. As Machiavelli noted, injury should be done all at once so that, being tasted less, they offend less, while benefits should be given little by little, so that the flavor of them may last longer. A modern political example is the shock therapy. Economic reforms some countries have implemented. A new government might enact a series of deeply unpopular austerity measures all at once, cutting subsidies, privatizing industries, slashing public spending. The public outcry is immediate and furious. But after this initial painful surgery, the government can spend the rest of its term offering small tax breaks and celebrating tiny signs of growth. The narrative shifts from "they are destroying our country" to "they made the tough decisions." And now things are slowly getting better. In the corporate world, a new CEO taking over a failing company often uses this exact playbook. In their first 90 days, they might announce a massive restructuring, layoffs, closed divisions, and a management overhaul. The shock is brutal. But once the bloodshed is over, the CEO can start rebuilding. They introduce new bonus structures, invest in training, and celebrate small wins. Over time, the employees who survived the purge see the CEO not as the person who fired their friends, but as the one who saved the company and is now rewarding their loyalty. Destroy or be destroyed. This lesson is Machiavelli at his most ruthless. When you're dealing with an enemy who has the power to hurt you, you have two choices. Either win them over completely or annihilate them. There is no middle ground. He put it bluntly. Men must either be caressed or annihilated. Why? Because people will seek revenge for small injuries, but they cannot for great ones. The worst mistake a ruler can make, he warns, is to inflict a minor wound. If you just take some of their power, tarnish their reputation, or seize a bit of their territory, you've only created an enemy with both a motive for revenge and the means to eventually get it. You've given them a burning desire to see you fail and left them able to plot your downfall. The psychological principle here is the powerful human need for retribution. A small humiliation doesn't neutralize a threat. It incubates it. It festers into a grievance that can wait years for a moment of weakness. The person you embarrassed in a meeting today could be the one sabotaging your career 5 years from now. Therefore, Machiavelli's logic is cold and absolute. Any injury you do to a man must be so severe that you don't have to fear his revenge. This means if you can't make someone a true, loyal, caressed friend who benefits so much from your success, they'd never betray you, then you must remove their ability to strike back. In his time, that could mean physical elimination. In ours, it means dismantling their power base, ruining their reputation, or removing them from the game entirely. Look at the world of corporate takeovers. When one company acquires another, what should they do with the old executive team? Inflicting small injuries like demotions often leads to a culture clash, internal sabotage, and disgruntled executives, leaving to start a rival company. The Machiavellian approach is twofold. Either caress them with massive retention packages and powerful new roles, making them loyal stakeholders, or annihilate them by firing the entire top tier of leadership on day one. It's harsh, but it ensures no old guard is left to plot against the new regime. Historically, the Roman destruction of Carthage is a chilling example. After the Second Punic War, Rome defeated Carthage, but didn't destroy it, imposing heavy penalties instead of minor injury on a geopolitical scale. This allowed Carthage to recover and resent, leading to a third war. Learning their lesson, the Romans then showed no mercy. They razed the city and enslaved its people. The famous story about sowing the ground with salt is likely a later legend, but it captures the spirit of what Rome did. They inflicted an injury so great they never had to fear Carthage's revenge again. Avoid being hated. This lesson sounds like a direct contradiction to everything we've just covered. If a ruler should be feared and be willing to inflict devastating injuries, how can they possibly avoid being hated? This is where we see the nuance in Machiavelli's thinking. He draws a critical line between fear and hatred. Fear is a strategic tool. Hatred is a poison that guarantees your destruction. A ruler is feared when people understand he's powerful and will punish anyone who steps out of line. They respect his strength, even if they don't like his methods. A ruler is hated, however, when he's seen as greedy, erratic, and unjust. Hatred erupts when a leader acts not for the security of the state, but for his own cruel pleasure or personal enrichment. Machiavelli is incredibly specific about how to achieve this balance. A prince can absolutely be feared without being hated, and the key is simple. Abstain from the property of his citizens and subjects, and from their women. He cynically notes that men forget more quickly the death of their father than the loss of their patrimony, their inheritance. This reveals a core insight into human motivation. People can accept brutal political acts, even executions, if they're framed as necessary for public order. But when a ruler starts seizing their property and money for his own gain, he crosses a line. He's no longer a stern guardian. He's a thief. This personal violation breeds a deep, unforgivable hatred. The psychology here is about justice and fairness. People can tolerate a strict system as long as it's consistent. They fear the consequences of breaking the rules, but they will not tolerate a system that feels predatory, where the ruler himself breaks the social contract to get rich at their expense. Fear is a response to power. Hatred is a response to injustice. When a leader inspires hatred, he hands his subjects a moral cause to unite against him. A conspiracy against a feared leader is a risky bet. A conspiracy against a hated leader becomes a moral crusade. Cesare Borgia, who Machiavelli often used as a model, was a master of this. He was famously ruthless, but his cruelty always had a purpose. After conquering the chaotic province of Ramonia, he appointed a cruel but efficient governor, Ramiro d'Orco, to pacify it with an iron fist. D'Orco succeeded, but his brutality made him hated. Once order was restored, Borgia, not wanting that hatred to transfer to him, had d'Orco publicly arrested, tried, and executed. His body was displayed in the town square. With this one spectacular act, Borgia achieved three things. He pacified a region, he satisfied the people's need for vengeance against his own henchmen, and he cemented their fear of him while appearing as their ultimate, just protector. Though Borgia's own fortune would eventually turn, this move was a masterstroke of avoiding hatred. Be both the fox and the lion. Here, Machiavelli gets into the duality of power. Brute strength isn't enough, and neither is pure cunning. To survive and thrive, a ruler must embody two animals, the lion and the fox. He writes, "The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves." This powerful metaphor breaks down the two essential skills for dominance. The lion is overt power, force, and intimidation. The lion crushes enemies and makes a show of strength that terrifies opponents into submission. It's the army, the police force, the aggressive lawsuit. The lion's power is loud, visible, and undeniable. But the lion is also simple. Its brute force makes it vulnerable to subtle threats like deception, intrigue, and conspiracy. It can walk right into a trap because it lacks the cleverness to see it coming. The fox, on the other hand, is cunning, deceptive, and intelligent. The fox doesn't fight enemies head-on. It outwits them. It understands hidden motives, navigates complex negotiations, and uses misdirection to achieve its goals. The fox is the diplomat, the spy, the strategist who wins the battle before it's even fought. But the fox is physically weak. When confronted by wolves, overwhelming force its cleverness might not be enough to save it. A leader who is only a lion is just a thug easily outmaneuvered by smarter rivals. A leader who is only a fox is seen as weak and shifty, likely to be overthrown by a more powerful aggressor. The truly effective ruler knows how to switch between these two personas. They must have the lion's capacity for overwhelming force, but the fox's wisdom to know when to use a tend. More importantly, when to rely on cunning instead. Psychologically, this is about strategic flexibility. The ruler can't be attached to just one way of operating. They must assess each situation with cold rationality. Is this a problem that needs a public display of force to deter future challengers, the lion? Or does it require quiet manipulation to avoid an open conflict, a fox? A modern CEO has to be both. They must be a lion when facing down a hostile takeover or making a decisive, non-negotiable cut. They have to project unshakable strength. But they must also be a fox when negotiating a complex partnership, navigating the politics of their board, or strategically leaking information to the press to shape public perception. Use a standing army, not mercenaries. Machiavelli dedicates a huge part of The Prince to military affairs, which he saw as a ruler's most crucial skill. His central argument here is a powerful lesson on loyalty and control. A ruler's security must be built on his own arms, not on hired guns. In Machiavelli's time, Italian city-states often used mercenary armies condottieri to fight their wars. He saw this as a fatal error. Mercenaries, he argued, are disunited, ambitious, without discipline, unfaithful. Their only motivation is money. They won't risk their lives for your cause. If the danger is too great, if a richer enemy comes along, they'll switch sides without a second thought. A ruler who relies on mercenaries places the fate of his state in the hands of people who have absolutely no stake in its survival. Their loyalty is a commodity, for sale to the highest bidder. Instead, Machiavelli championed the creation of an army of the ruler's own citizens or subjects. A citizen army is bound to the state by more than just pay. They're fighting for their homes, their families, and their way of life. Their loyalty is personal and patriotic. They have everything to lose if the state falls, so they will fight with a ferocity that no mercenary can ever match. Arming one's own people, Machiavelli believed, forges a powerful bond between the ruler and the ruled. The underlying principle here is about aligning incentives. You can't build lasting power on a foundation of people whose goals don't match yours. Mercenaries are incentivized to drag out wars to keep getting paid and to avoid risky battles. A citizen army is incentivized to win the war as quickly and decisively as possible so they can go home. So how does this apply today, when most of us aren't hiring mercenaries? Think of your army as your core team or your key employees. Is your business built on a core of loyal, dedicated employees who believe in the company's mission, a citizen army? Or are you overly reliant on freelancers and consultants who are just there for the paycheck and could leave for a better offer tomorrow, mercenaries? A founder who builds a strong company culture and gives key employees equity is creating a citizen army. Their team will fight harder for the company's survival because its success is their success. A company that treats its employees as disposable cogs is relying on mercenaries. They might work fine in good times, but in a crisis, that workforce will evaporate. True power cannot be outsourced. Appear virtuous, even when you are not. This lesson gets to the heart of Machiavellian deception and the critical role of public perception. He understood that in a game of power, what people believe is true is often more important than the truth itself. He didn't advise a ruler to be merciful, faithful, humane, and religious. He advised a ruler to appear to be all of those things. As he puts it, everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. The general public judges a leader based on their public image and the results they get. Only a handful of insiders ever see the ruler's true nature, and they do not dare to oppose the opinion of the many. Machiavelli's logic is that actually being virtuous all the time would be a disaster for a ruler. A leader who is always merciful might fail to make a necessary, brutal example. A leader who always keeps his word might be trapped by a bad deal when circumstances change. A leader who is always humane might shrink from the necessary cruelty that securing the state demands. As he says, a prince is often forced, in order to maintain the state, to act contrary to faith, friendship, humanity, and religion. So, the ruler must be a master of appearances. In public, he should speak the language of virtue. He must cultivate a reputation as a good and moral person. Privately, however, his mind must be prepared to do the exact opposite, to be cruel, faithless, and ruthless the moment state security demands it. He needs a mind so flexible that he can turn himself as the winds and variations of fortune force it. The psychological power here is immense. People want to believe their leaders are good. When a leader who has built a virtuous image commits a ruthless act, the public is more likely to give him the benefit of the doubt. They'll rationalize it. He must have had a good reason, or it was a necessary evil. They do the mental gymnastics for him. But a leader with a reputation for cruelty gets no such latitude. Every action is interpreted in the worst possible light. Modern politics is a theater of this principle. Politicians spend millions crafting an image of being a compassionate family man, a devout patriot, and a champion of the common person. They kiss babies, and their speeches are filled with moral platitudes. This is the art of appearing virtuous. This carefully built image gives them cover when they have to make unpopular decisions, break campaign promises, or authorize covert actions. Their public image is a shield that deflects criticism and keeps their supporters on their side. Master your own fate by preparing for fortune's storms. In his final profound lesson, Machiavelli tackles the eternal question of fate versus free will. He uses the metaphor of fortune, which he personifies as a wild, unpredictable river. When the river is calm, people ignore it, but when it rages, it floods the plains, tears down everything in its path, and sweeps away all who are unprepared. This river represents the unpredictable events of life. Economic collapses, plagues, foreign invasions, sudden shifts in public opinion. These are the storms of fortune that can destroy any ruler. Many leaders, he notes, blame their downfall on bad luck, but Machiavelli refuses to surrender to fatalism. He argues that while fortune may control about half of our lives, the other half is left to our own free will and foresight. A wise ruler, during times of peace and calm, doesn't sit idle. Prepares, he builds dikes and dams. He strengthens his army, fills his treasuries, secures his alliances, and trains his mind for adversity. When the storm of fortune inevitably arrives, these preparations allow him to channel the floodwater. He might not stop the flood, but he can mitigate the damage, protect his core assets, and survive while his unprepared neighbors are washed away. The ruler who prepares for the worst is the one who masters his own destiny, or at least as much of it as a mortal can. The principle here is about being proactive, not reactive. Most people wait for a crisis to hit and then scramble in a panic. The Machiavellian leader is different. He is constantly gaming out worst-case scenarios. What if my main source of income disappears? What if my most powerful ally betrays me? What if a new technology disrupts my entire industry? By preparing for these possibilities when he has the time and resources, he robs the future crisis of its most potent weapon: surprise. In business, this means diversifying revenue streams, instead of relying on a single client. It means investing in R&D even when your current products are selling well. It means building a war chest of cash to survive a downturn. The companies that did this before the 2008 financial crisis or the 2020 pandemic were able to weather the storm and often emerge stronger by buying up the assets of their unprepared rivals. Machiavelli's final message is that power isn't a static object, but a dynamic force. It requires constant vigilance, relentless preparation, and the courage to face the world's unpredictable nature. The ruler who blames his failures on bad luck is a fool. The ruler who masters his fate is the one who, in the sunshine, prepares for the storm. We've journeyed through 8 of Machiavelli's most potent and unsettling lessons. These are not comfortable ideas. They challenge our modern notions of leadership and morality, but to just dismiss them as evil is to miss the point. Machiavelli wrote a field guide to the world as it is, not as we wish it were. These principles are at play every single day in governments, corporations, and even in our own lives. Understanding them is the first step to defending against the man for the bold, the first step to using them. If this journey into the mind of Machiavelli has challenged you, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more deep dives into the strategies of power and philosophy. And now, a question for you. In our modern, interconnected world, do you believe these principles are more or less relevant than they were 500 years ago? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. The world of Niccolò Machiavelli is a dark and dangerous place, where virtue can lead to ruin and calculated cruelty can lead to stability. His lessons on power are a masterclass in psychological control and strategic thinking. We've seen that it's safer to be feared than loved, but essential to avoid being hated. We've learned to inflict injuries all at once, to destroy what we cannot befriend, and to embody both the ruthless lion and the cunning fox. And above all, we've seen the need to rely on our own loyal forces, to master the art of appearances, and to prepare relentlessly for the storms of fortune. Together, these lessons form a cohesive and chillingly effective blueprint for navigating the world of power. They reveal that Machiavelli's concept of fear was not about mindless terror, but about a disciplined, strategic tool. It's about creating predictable outcomes in an unpredictable world by leveraging the most predictable parts of human nature: self-interest and self-preservation, whether we see him as a teacher of tyrants or a brutal realist telling a necessary truth. His shadow stretches over the centuries, forcing us to confront the uncomfortable relationship between power, morality, and fear.